Hello, friends, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to WeatherBrains episode number 619. I'm going to sound like NPR this evening. No, I'm not. We're going to sound like the Morning Zoo crew. This is the pre-show. This is for November 27th, 2017. We have wrapped up Thanksgiving, and we are getting set to roll into the Christmas season as I peer at the monitor on my screen up here. What?
You have to say roll.
RTR. Roll Tide, Bill. Can you say War Eagle?
I'll put you up for the. Oh yeah, War Eagle. I mean, it was quite a
War Eagle.
quite a dismantling. So, are
Very
you
impressive.
up for the
win.
Mississippi State coach job yet?
I want to be the. I want to be the offensive coordinator because
Very offensive.
I am a creative play caller.
Oh, I like
People that have coached against me in my 3 games I've coached know my routine. Second play from scrimmage, I always call the flea flicker. Greatest play in college football, and it typically works. Never go for a field goal. Always go for it on 4th down. Never try an extra point. I don't need a place kicker. You know what? We just go for it.
You're the Lane Kiffin of UAB football.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a train wreck, but it's interesting to watch. Kim, are you still married?
I am
Freshly married.
2 weeks and counting.
They said it wouldn't last. They were wrong.
Man, whoever made that short of a prediction, that's very impressive. Yeah, we're doing really well and fully recovered from the wedding. Man, those things, no matter how you plan it, I think those things get pretty stressful.
They are. And Kim, Brian, and I, our feelings are hurt. We are wedding singers, and Brian, we never got that invitation.
Nope, never saw it.
Oh, wow, those amazing hidden talents. If I'd only known.
We've only just begun to live. White lace and promises, a kiss for luck, and we're on our way. I sound like Kermit the Frog.
You did. Very good imitation of the guy with the green skin.
Yeah, Kermit the Frog singing the Carpenters. So there. This, by the way, for those that don't know, this is the part of the show where we share boring personal stories, humorous anecdotes, and we say outrageous things. And I think we've killed all 3 of those birds with one stone here.
I think so.
Since we've been on the air. How did I get to be the Bama Boom guy? Somehow I've become the information bureau of Alabama.
I've heard that first one, though. That was real.
It's just like this is all I do now. I mean, what's going to happen when the weather gets active again? I needed to appoint a boom officer. I actually believe, and this is an exclusive for those that watch the pre-show, I do believe I know the source, and this is not going to be a fart joke or something like that. I think I know the origin, and I think I probably can't say because somebody might be at my doorsteps tomorrow.
Those people?
And they would break my legs and throw me in an underground cell.
Really?
I have
Is this the FBI or the CIA?
It's clearly the feds, but I'm just saying I believe the origin could be from a federal operation, and they will never say what they're doing, but I have an inside plant. That little bird told me enough about it to know that they could be testing hypersonic weapons at up to Mach 6 speed, and it involves the feds, and I'll just leave it at that. So that's and I won't even say that on the regular show. That's all. I'd like Forrest Gump. That's all I got to say about that.
Wow. I've been fascinated following the saga with your Facebook page. It sounds like this has been happening in a lot of places. So this isn't just a local.
Yeah, and I think for some of them there's a good explanation involving some geological type event or military aircraft or bolide, meteor or something. But for our region, I think a lot of it has to do with a federal facility where they test weapons used in war. And I'm not saying we're about to go into a war. I'm not saying anything. I'm just saying I think this is where it's coming from. And beyond that, I just can't say anything else. But it's interesting when NASA says they don't know, and the local Air Force Base operations say we have nothing to do with it. And I believe those guys. And I know sometimes they have confidential missions that they can't discuss, but I really do believe them. I think if they had something going on, they just wouldn't say anything. But this operation I'm talking about, they will not respond to phone calls, emails, nothing. But if anybody up there is watching this show right now, give me a call, please. I promise not to tell the world. But people deserve an explanation, and it's getting ridiculous where you get these things once a day, and it's literally shaking windows to the point where you're getting some issues. I'll put it this way: the natives are getting restless, and of course, it brings out all the conspiracy theory lunatics, the chemtrail guys. Chemtrails. These guys. I made the mistake of mentioning that on a discussion I put up on Facebook, and they just attack me like flies on poop. And what they do, they put these links to these crappy YouTube videos, that prove chemtrails are real, and they're not nice people. I don't mind arguing. I love it. I think it's great, but it's like, guys, don't. And I do notice Facebook actually flagged a number of those links as spam right away, so I don't even have to touch it. So, but the chemtrail guys are out, and all the conspiracy guys, they're just going nuts. But anyway, we better change the subject before a Fed guy comes in this door right now in a black suit.
They may be busting down the door as we speak.
So, Bill, when did you hear one?
That first one, that
November 14th.
Yeah, I mean, it was clear. It was extremely loud. We were in the office, and we all stopped and looked at each other and said, that was big. I mean, it was very noticeable.
The one today, in fact, everybody's been great like the Alabama Geological Survey. They've been fantastic because, we're not geologists here. I'm not. But they've been very good to work with me and getting me some seismic data. And the one this morning that was at about 8 o'clock, 8:04, showed up very clearly. And they explained this is not seismic. It's something else. And the odd thing about Dr. Cook up at NASA, who knows, Bill Cook knows everything. This guy, we ought to get him on the show sometime. He's great. But he said the signature on the seismographs, it's not of a supersonic aircraft. It might be supersonic, but it's not an aircraft, which I think clues us into what might be going on here. But he couldn't he couldn't completely rule out a bolide. But I tell you, if there's a bolide, he would know. So, all right, we're done talking about it before I get in trouble. I had a salad for dinner. Let's just change the subject. Had a salad for dinner.
Yeah. Well, you brought up the Facebook flags. What have you thought about how they're doing so far? The very first one that I saw was actually Facebook flagging an Onion article as probably false.
Come on.
Yeah,
Come on now.
Onion. They're going after satire.
No, the satire is what makes the internet so great. I mean, please don't tag the Onion stuff. I would not want to be in their shoes. I'll put it this way. I would not want to be in their position. It's just, these are very challenging times. And whatever you do, people get mad, and goodness. We have to invite somebody on here. All right, stand by. Let's make an invitation here. Anybody ever heard of Johnson? How's he doing at NBC? What do we have to do to get him back on the show? Send money?
Childcare.
Yeah.
You could all volunteer to go over once a week and run the nursery.
I would just love to hear Kevin and Nate go at it on the television side. So, Kim, we're having a secret Vortex Southeast meeting tomorrow evening.
Oh, are you? What's the secret, or can you not tell me anything more than there's just
it's like the other issue. If it was a secret, why did I just say that?
Right.
No,
we're gonna
I won't tell anybody
any more than that.
Yeah.
just some of the Birmingham people are getting together just to talk about the Huntsville gathering, and it's all good. It's not secret. We're just getting together to talk. That's all it is.
So did you happen to get to go to the workshop? I was really sad to have to miss it with the wedding stuff, but it looked really great. Did you go?
Very briefly, Brian and I zipped up, and I was in a panel discussion. And the problem with Vortex Southeast, that workshop in Huntsville, for television broadcasters, meteorologists, November is a ratings month. That's one of the biggest sweeps months of the year. So we can't take any time off. So I just couldn't go. But we did go the Friday morning and zip right back. But I wish I could have been there the whole time. And the posters, goodness, the posters were just incredibly good. I mean, that was like going to some little mini AMS or NWA type meeting. I mean, the posters were just excellent. And I wish I had more time to go through. So I would like to see more of that, because that is so useful to those of us little people, us grunts in the field that have to, work severe weather here. It was just marvelous. And Brian, do we need to tell your secret while we're sharing secrets here?
Oh, I don't know.
So we, Kim, we were at the Vortex Southeast workshop, and guess who left the workshop, walked down to the local Apple store, and spent $1,200 on a stinking phone.
Brian?
Just
Brian,
money.
Brian, you want to show us your new phone?
I just did.
Whip out that new phone. Let's see it here. Let me get the video here. Wait, hang on. All right. Ooh.
What makes this a super special $1,200 phone?
It's just an iPhone X. It isn't. But when you have a six, that's
just admit it, Brian. It's a status symbol. Brian's the only one on the show that has one. He's kind of a big deal.
Well, I'll agree with you. I'm a kind of a big deal part, but
in his office, he has many leather-bound books. Smells of rich mahogany in there.
Now that's not true, because one of our fans wrote in and said something about the dump or something that my office
brewery.
No, he called it a brewery.
Brewery.
The brewery comment, that was the greatest thing ever. That was one of the greatest emails ever. I've always said it looks like the Turkey Creek landfill, but the brewery comment was even better. Wow.
Don't I wish?
So, let me welcome our television friends. I love it when they join the show in the middle of a conversation like that. Welcome to WeatherBrains.
There goes my reputation.
Yeah, about to say, it's Brian, our old buddy on the TV side. But no, thank you for watching on television. It's a quiet night weather-wise, so we're not interrupting too much on the radar. So what this is. Everybody that watches Monday night, this is WeatherBrains, and you join us during the pre-show. And now that we are online, we can start this thing. Are we all here, Bill?
Yes, we are. Hello, Lourdes.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we hear you fine. You sound great. Good. Hey, Steve.
Hey there.
All right, we're all here.
Yeah, we're all here. Let's roll it. This is going to be a good show. I'm going to step out of the way and listen. I can't
Aubrey
wait.
Needs another invite.
Ooh, well,
She says it's not showing up.
Let me just re-invite Aubrey then. So here comes invite number 2 for her. So here we go, Mr. Producer, in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Time for WeatherBrains. This is the weekly show that's all about atmospheric science. Yes, this is episode number 619 for November 27th. 2017, we're kind of wrapping up Thanksgiving, kind of rolling into the Christmas season here, and we are glad you're with us. Got a good show tonight. I feel it in my bones. Brian Peters, I feel it. So last week you were AWOL. You were on a family excursion, right?
I was not AWOL. I told you where I was. I was in Tallahassee, Florida at a family reunion for Thanksgiving. And I need to set the record straight. I've only been drunk once in my life, and that was at the expense of the Birmingham Police Department.
That's a show title right there.
I can fix
only
that.
Been
Want to make
drunk.
it twice?
Yes, especially if you're paying.
Got it. Hey, my treat.
Wow.
Wow.
So
I got a
did you
date.
see it? Did you see a Tallahassee lassie when you were there?
No, I pretty much stayed at my sister-in-law's house and did, around the house things.
Showing off your iPhone X, huh?
Yeah.
I didn't
I have
show
a new
it to anybody.
iPhone 10. No, we have so many Florida State people that come on the show. I got to get Tallahassee Lassie in the soundboard here. That's a great song. Most people never heard that. But for those that don't know, Brian did drop some money on a brand new phone at Vortex Southeast. You want to show us that thing, Brian?
And it's all your fault, James, because you're the one who egged me on. See, right there.
He blames me for losing $1,200 in the deal.
I didn't lose $1,200. I got an iPhone X.
Got a fancy phone. All right, awesome. So
it's great to be
Aubrey,
back.
do you have, Aubrey, a $1,200 phone?
Aubrey doesn't make enough to have a fraction of a $1,200 phone. No, I have my Google Pixel. I'm all for the Google. I'm an Android girl.
It's a great phone. A Pixel.
It is a great phone.
A great phone. Now the big one has got the burn-in problems, right? But the little one doesn't.
No, and so. You know what? I don't want to be worried about spending that much money on on a phone. I would be freaked out every day and like hold it like a baby to not drop it.
I could not imagine when I was growing up ever having $1,200, much less to spend on a phone. So I'm kind of the same way. I'll stick with my old cheapy clunker here. No, mine's still. I bought mine last year, and in Brian's defense, Brian, your old phone was dying. You had to do
having
something.
some issues.
Do you carry it around like a baby? Are you super protective of it?
No, I mean I have a case on it. But other than the case, I'm not being super protective.
How's the facial recognition, Brian?
Flawless, absolutely fantastic.
Take it up
with a face like that.
Thank you. Well, I had my wife look into it, and it wouldn't recognize her.
Oh, that's good.
Well,
you can't see your secret text on there, huh?
That's right. Yes.
But forget Brian going to Tallahassee and buying some stinking phone. The big story is Kim. The wedding happened, and you're still married.
We're still married, and I've been thinking. Well, it actually rained on our wedding day, and that's supposed to be a good luck thing, right?
Mm-hmm. It's supposed to be good luck.
Then we are set. Yeah, 2 weeks strong and counting. It's gonna be good.
We had the most vicious thunderstorm during our wedding. It was like awesome. We were married in June, and where we are, we have these air mass storms every summer afternoon and evening, and we just happened to get one drift right over the church, and it was awesome. And here we are, 36 years later, we're still married, so it worked.
That's awesome.
Perfect.
So where did you get married, James? What town?
Tuscaloosa, Alabama. And Tuscaloosa is the thunderstorm capital of the world. Kim, where was your wedding? What town?
We got married in Guthrie, Oklahoma, and Guthrie was the original territorial capital of Oklahoma. I think the story goes that it moved to Oklahoma City when some guys with guns broke into a building, stole a flag, and took it down to Oklahoma City, and the capital was moved. So, but Patrick's family is right. Hashtag Oklahoma. But Patrick's family is from Oklahoma, so they settled in Guthrie in the land run, and that's where his parents got married, and his uncle was the priest that did the service, and was pretty wonderful.
Cool. So where was the honeymoon? We ask nosy questions on this show.
That's okay. This is also a fun weather story, but we went to Kauai. Ooh. And for folks who are listening who may be familiar, the Hawaiian Islands are a wonderful and very interesting, meteorologically interesting place to go. If you want to do a honeymoon in a place where you see several different climate zones in rapid succession, it's unbeatable. Have you guys been to the Hawaiian Islands?
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Just once.
Aubrey has. She raised
I've been to
hand.
Maui, and it was phenomenal. And then the difference from one side of the island to the other to 10,000 feet up, it was absolutely incredible. You're right. It was definitely really interesting.
Yeah, we took a helicopter tour, and we were coming up along sort of the Grand Canyon of the Pacific is what it's called. The canyon on Kauai is actually about as deep as the Grand Canyon. It's just much greener. And we were coming around to the north side of the island, and I knew that we were about to hit more turbulence and the stronger winds on the north side. And I was bracing myself, and I think the pilot could tell that I was getting nervous. So he asked me to describe orographic lift and how clouds form on the north side. And it was so cute. And I did. I felt a lot better for like 2 minutes. And I was like, thanks. And he's like, you have no idea how many times I have to explain this. Everyone's like, why are there clouds? It's mountains, but it's in the ocean. Yeah, it was pretty fun.
Awesome. Well, cool. Bill, bring in our guest here before they hang up on us.
Yeah, James, we got a special guest panelist tonight. She's back after a long absence, Dr. Lourdes Avalos Bramer. And I'm sure I said some of that wrong, but Lourdes, it's great to see you again.
Nice to see you. Thank you for inviting me.
Now, what's been happening since you were last on the show? I mean,
it's been almost exactly 4 years.
Any changes in your career, or?
I'm still teaching at Plymouth State. I have been promoted to full professor now.
Well, I'm glad I didn't say that. I saw on your LinkedIn page you haven't changed that.
Oh, that's right. I need
to reminder. Get that done.
And I'm working with AMS to publish an update of the book that I'm sure we'll mention later. And I'm writing a new book about atmospheric optics.
Oh, wow. That's exciting. So how did family, friends in Puerto Rico survive the hurricane? Lourdes, give us an update.
Let's see. I have a few family members there, not too many. One of them is a policeman, so he was extremely busy during the hurricane and after. My many friends have kept me more or less informed, and it was actually very interesting to see how scared people were right before. Mostly from Facebook posts is my source. And then the hurricane came and total silence because everybody lost power. And then all you had were the people that were up here that have family and friends down there worried about not having heard from them, some of them for 2 or 3 weeks or even longer. So it was kind of scary. And it's not over yet. People are still dealing with this, some without power, trying to work around all the loss of infrastructure. So everybody was safe, but it's hard to deal with the aftermath.
Wow. So how did the hurricane end up comparing to the San Felipe hurricane in 1928?
It fell a little short of San Felipe. San Felipe made landfall as a Category 5. By the way, the first Category 5 landfall in U.S. territory, right, in 1928. And this was 5 knots, I believe, away from being a Category 5. So it made landfall as a strong Category 4. And the last time there was a Category 4 landfall was 1932 with San Ciprian.
Wow, that's just amazing.
Yeah. So it's been a while.
Well, we are really thrilled to have you on the show tonight. You're deputized now as a full WeatherBrains panelist. So welcome to the show tonight. So you can.
Thank you. My pleasure to be here.
You can talk. You can ask great questions about our guest and his book tonight. Tonight's guest WeatherBrain is Stephen Long, who wrote the great book 38 about the hurricane that transformed New England, which is, of course, the famous 1938 hurricane. Stephen, you're an author, and you write about all things that relate to our life on this planet. So welcome to the show tonight.
Thank you so much. Really enjoying it so far and looking forward to it.
So where do you join us from? Where are you right now, Stephen?
I'm up in Corinth, Vermont, and we are experiencing 13 degrees and a nice little dusting of snow on the ground.
Wow. So Steve, is New Hampshire upside down or is Vermont upside down?
Well, New Hampshire's upside down. Vermont's just shaped perfectly.
Sorry.
Absolutely.
I disagree.
So Brian, how close would you have been to where Stephen is when you were a kid?
I'm not sure that it's that far away. Haven't been to back up to Vermont much in my adult years, and I'm trying to remember exactly where Corinth was.
So were you at Linden State? Is that
no? I lived in Wells River. It's right on.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh God, that's 15 miles away.
I was thinking it was close. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yeah. Wells River is just it's in Newberry. It's just north of Bradford, and we're one town over from Bradford.
That's it. Okay.
Yeah.
So, Brian, are you feeling a little homesick for 13 and a light dusting of snow?
The dusting of snow, I like. The 13, I'm happy with my 64 or so today.
Yeah.
So, Lourdes, you've been known to have a few big snowstorms up there in your neck of the woods too.
Oh yeah, and it is 13 here. Well, it feels like 13. Yes, our weather would be very similar. Steve's weather and my weather. It was pretty cold when I was coming home earlier today.
Yeah.
Well, Steve, I really enjoyed the book. I got to finish reading it over the weekend. You called the 1938 hurricane New England's Katrina. So back up that statement if you can.
Well, this storm was totally devastating to New England. It was both. Well, it had all three of the factors in a hurricane. So it had a storm surge that brought 15 feet of water to downtown Providence. It swamped Long Island in the coastal New England. It had tremendous flooding inland from the rain. And then it also had 100-mile-an-hour winds that came all the way up into Vermont and New Hampshire, up 150, 200 miles inland. So that kind of wind actually was not experienced in Katrina, but it was totally unexpected. This was a time before people thought hurricanes hit New England. It had been 2 generations since we'd had one, and so people just had no idea. They thought hurricanes happened down south. They happened in the Carolinas or Florida or Texas, and so nobody knew this was coming. And when it did, it just sucked entire beachfront communities out into the sea. 600 people died, most of them in Rhode Island. 400 plus people died in Rhode Island, mostly from the storm surge. So tremendous loss of life, tremendous infrastructure damage, and a lot of that's been reported on in other books. And what I wanted to do is talk about what happened farther north, what happened up in New Hampshire and Vermont. It's the only Category 2 hurricane to ever affect Vermont. And so I wanted to talk about what happened up here. And since my background is in forestry and conservation, I really wanted to talk about what it did to the forests of New England.
So it was an amazing amount of damage. And you say in the book, I think that it was somewhere in the order, if it were in 2017 dollars, we're talking about, what'd you say, $5 billion worth of timber lost?
Well, $5 billion worth of damage overall. If it were to replay today, it would be many, many times that, because there are so many more people living in the area, so much more infrastructure, so much more wealth. There's just so much more to be affected by the storm. But for 1938 and at the tail end of the Great Depression, this was a tremendous insult to people who were already down.
So talk about the impact that the hurricane had on the forests of New England, because it had some long-lasting effects, right?
Yes, the effects would play out over many generations. But it blew down an amazing amount of trees. It blew down trees over a 15 million acre area. It blew down in that 600,000 acres. So it was spread out quite a bit where it affected it. So a lot of these were smallish blowdowns. Others were larger. As the destruction was quite varied, depending on a number of different factors. But there was to quantify it, there was 2.6 billion board feet on the ground, and that in 4 or 5 hours, that was 5 times the annual timber harvest in this region. So to give you a picture of how much wood that was, if you picture just your basic log truck that I suspect you see on the roads down where you are, that probably is carrying 6,000 board feet. So there would have been 430,000 of those truckloads of wood. Yeah, 430. So, if there was a convoy of trucks, it would stretch from Boston into Seattle and back again. This was just a tremendous amount of wood down on the ground. So both, you think of it in terms of it's logs, it's lumber, but it's also brush, and the capacity for forest fire was something that people were very, very afraid of.
So talk about the efforts that were mobilized in the wake of the storm to stop that fire hazard from happening.
Sure. So this is the late 30s. It's the New Deal. We've got a government that is very, very nimble, and they set up the Northeast Timber Salvage Administration almost within days. And so this was run by the Forest Service, and it was a program that had there were two elements to it. One was the fire threat reduction part of it, and the other was the timber salvage. And so what they were trying to do was they were working on I'm getting a bit of feedback there. So they were they had in place, because of this was the New Deal, there was the WPA, the Works Progress Administration, and the CCC, the Civilian Conservation Corps. These are two make work programs that were in place and that provided a source of labor. And so these folks they were asked to go out and clean up the damage, clean up the trees that were down on the ground, and in order to bring back the capacity to fight fires. One of the things that there had been something like 300 fire towers on the mountaintops all throughout New England. And so they needed to get the access to them back. So that was one of the big things, was to clear the trails. Another thing was around villages and towns and along roadsides, to just get the trees out of the road, get them away from the road, so you'd create a bit of a fire break. So all of these WPA workers, CCC boys, and Forest Service, in about a year period it was actually maybe more like only 6 or 7 months, because they got most of their work done by March. The hurricane happened in September of 38. And then by March, all of this work was pretty much accomplished. But they cleared miles of roads. They piled brush. They burned brush piles when they had good conditions, snow on the ground, rain. So they took all of this brush that was in the Forest Service's mind quite a hazard. They took all of this and they got rid of it by burning under safe conditions. So there was all of that effort, and then on the other side of it, on the logging effort. See, this was mostly private land. New England has very, very little public land, and so most of this damage was on forests that were owned by individual people. And so these trees, these forests were people's individual bank accounts, their woodland bank accounts. And so what the Forest Service did, because there was 5 times the amount of wood on the ground as the annual harvest. This is a tremendous glut of wood, and so if the market forces were allowed to be the only game in town, nobody would have gotten a nickel for that wood because it was everywhere. And so, I mean, people would have paid to get rid of this wood. And so, what the Timber Salvage Administration did was they created this program to buy logs. And so, if you could hire a logger to get the wood to a concentration yard or to a pond, they would buy it. They would pay good money. They would pay the going rate for that wood. So they established this market for the wood, and something like 30,000 landowners were made whole by this effort.
Kim, have you ever heard of that situation? I mean, that's a pretty fascinating use of government to step in an economic situation.
Yeah, I actually was about to
take control.
Right. Yeah, it's an interesting measure that I was just thinking about the Dust Bowl. Around that, or just a little bit earlier than that, a couple years before, the government had stepped in with a lot of farmers who were overproducing on increasingly marginal land, contributing to the Dust Bowl effect. And the price of wheat was just plummeting. And they had a number of different programs to try to stabilize prices and disincentivize this overproduction, because farmers had one of two choices. They could either continue to produce more and more to try to actually make the total amount of income they needed, or they could all collude to reduce the amount they were producing and hope for a higher price. Well, things started to plummet the wrong direction, which was bad ecological policy and bad for the farmers. They also had a cow, when the Dust Bowl got really bad, a lot of the cattle started to die off because they were inhaling all of the dust. And the government had a buy-up program because cattle were going so inexpensively, and they helped farmers that way. And something, this also reminds me of the Dust Bowl with another question I have for you. In situations where you have this kind of broad ecological and economic catastrophe, you can have both out-migration as people flee the disaster zone, and in-migration as you have those folks who come in to do the public works projects. Did you read anything or find out anything about sort of the population geography and how populations changed in the wake of the hurricane, from people either moving out or moving in?
Yeah, that's really fascinating. I've in fact met people who came, whose family came to participate in the cleanup. So you're right about this. In the migration in was all sorts of sawmills. The sawmills came from any place they were available. So they came from as far away as Michigan and Wisconsin, from West Virginia. I mean, these people traveled a good long distance, and because there was work. And this was 1938. It's still, the Depression's still going strong, and so here was ready work. And so there was all sorts of people coming in for that. And on the outside, I'm not certain that people left, but they did. A lot of them did, in fact, change professions. So in Vermont, for instance, Vermont was still farming in 1938. New Hampshire and Massachusetts, not so much. Since, say, the 1870s, 1880s, they were pretty much gone out of farming, and then forests had come in. But in Vermont, they were still farming. And so what happened in Vermont when the hurricane came was that all of these sugar orchards, sugar maple orchards, so many of them were destroyed. So the destruction in Vermont was hilltops, hillside ridges, and that tends to be sugar maple orchards and woodlots. And so in Vermont, we lost a lot of farmers who no longer had So dairy farm. Let me just step back one little bit. Dairy farmers would have a maple orchard as a supplement to their income, but it was a serious supplement. It wasn't just pin money. This is money this was enough that they could hire a hired man for a year, and so this was real money. And so when they lost their capacity with these sugar bushes, a lot of people, that was kind of the final nail in the coffin for a lot of these farmers. And so Vermont's dairy farmers, we started losing a lot of those at that time. And it also was the beginning of the regrowth of the forest. So Vermont at the time of the hurricane was basically 50% open, 50% forested. And while its neighboring states, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, were already 80% forested because of the regrowth of trees. So Vermont was 70 years behind Massachusetts and New Hampshire as and the process of regenerating a new forest.
So did that contribute to the fall foliage that we all know Vermont is so famous for?
Absolutely. So in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, what had blown down primarily was white pine, and the white pine was in place because it's a good old field colonizer. So when a farmer stops working a field, stops haying it, or stops takes the cows off, then in New England, you don't have to plant trees. Trees happen. Here they come. It's harder to keep them out than it is to plant them. So we've got so Vermont started to regrow at that time. New Hampshire and Massachusetts started to regrow their forests after the hurricane. So what was blown down in Massachusetts and New Hampshire was a temporary holding species of white pine, a pioneer species, and so what replaced it then were the hardwoods that we like so much for the foliage. And so particularly in New Hampshire's foliage today is a mix of pine and hardwoods. It's a very nice mix. It's nowhere near as nice as Vermont's, of course, but it's
you want to rebut that any, Lourdes, there?
Yeah, we're gonna have to fight it out.
but in Vermont
there was so much rivalry between you two. That's just
Oh yeah.
Oh, tremendous.
Yes.
So then the foliage in Vermont, it because there wasn't that much pine in place, it more or less regrew to the hardwoods that were in place already. And so we had sort of a continuation of the northern hardwood forest in Vermont and a return to a hardwood forest in New Hampshire.
So were the white pine more vulnerable to the winds of the hurricane?
White pine was the most vulnerable species, not only because there was so much of it, but also because it grows very, very tall. The taller the tree, the more vulnerable it is. A white pine is also very shallow rooted, and so it doesn't take much to blow down a pine, and so you get the dominoes going, and they all come down. And so the white pine was tremendously vulnerable. It was also the most valuable timber species, so that combination is sort of what made it important to get the Northeast Timber Salvage Administration in place.
But it was very vulnerable once it was down on the ground to beetles and other insects, right? So you mentioned an interesting way that they preserved the logs, so that after they were harvested. How did they do that, Steve?
Right. One of the there's two things that can happen to white pine when it's on the ground for any length of time. it can get stained with this blue stain. It's a fungus. Or it can get pine sawyer beetles, and they come in and they make tunnels, and basically they make Swiss cheese out of a tree. And so in order to keep that from happening, they put them in ponds. So they delivered all of the logs, the white pine logs, to ponds and lakes. And so there was about 400 ponds and lakes throughout New England that were full of white pine logs, white pine floats. So that worked really well. Softwoods will float, hardwoods won't. So they couldn't do that with a hardwood. But it was 90% of what was salvaged was the white pine. And so they brought the pine to the ponds, both when it was water and when it was ice. And so they brought them out. They logged all winter long, brought them out onto the ice, and then when the ice broke up, they were down in the water.
You got a story in the opening part of the book about a young man who found himself out in the middle of the hurricane because he didn't expect it. So talk about Fred Hunt's story a little bit.
Yeah, Fred Hunt was a 14-year-old kid. He was playing hooky. He said that he was homeschooled, and that if he wasn't home, there was no school. And so there had been flood conditions that day. So earlier that day, Fred had never seen a village underwater. He lived in Rindge, New Hampshire, and he had heard that Jaffrey, the bigger town close by, had heard that it was underwater. And so wanting to go see that, he set out on foot. And everywhere he went, he came up against the flooding conditions. And so he couldn't quite get to Jaffrey, and he turned around and he ended up going to a different town. But basically, he decided at a certain point that he'd had enough. He had probably walked between 15 and 20 miles that day. And so he'd had enough. And what he did, what a 14-year-old kid playing hooky would do, which was he called his mother and asked his mother to come pick him up. And so she did. And they were driving home when the wind started to pick up. And there was a tree down in front of their car. So they were a half a mile from home. So they stopped and were there and to visit the neighbors. And the neighbors, all the shingles had blown off the roof, and so there was all sorts of water pouring into the house. So Fred's mother stayed with the neighbors to try to give them a hand, and she sent Fred home the rest of the way on foot. And so Fred was down along a woods road, which is like many in New England, are lined with stone walls and trees. And so he was on his way home. The wind was blowing, and then he noticed behind him that a tree had come down. And I said, Fred, how could you say you just noticed it? He said, well, this wind was just roaring. You would never know that there was a tree, that a tree had fallen. And so, but he looked around him and kind of saw the writing on the wall, and he decided, well, what I should do is get under that tree. And he said, it was about 2 or 3 feet in diameter, a pretty good sized tree. And so this 14-year-old boy climbs under the tree while every other tree in the forest blew down around him. The whole thing just went down in 5 or 10 minutes while he was under that tree. So it was really, really quick thinking on his part to get under there. And he told the story, to me 70 years later, and he could remember every little bit of it. And the whole forest blew down around him while he was under that white pine tree.
Well, that quick thinking saved his life for sure.
It
So-
did, yeah.
So, Lourdes, you're awful quiet over there. I expected some questions out of you. So don't be
Listening
bashful
here.
about jumping in here. I know that you went to see Dr. Avalis Bramer when you were doing your book, and
Yes, I did.
comment on her office a little bit.
Well, it was full of all of these Tim Burton action figures from it was not the kind of office that I ever went to see a professor in when I was in college. What's the movie, Lourdes,
It's Nightmare Before Christmas.
yeah.
I believe you described it as it's not the office of a stuffy academic.
That's right. That's right.
So I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah. I see that they're not behind you in your where you are now. You don't have your Nightmare Before Christmas figure behind you.
I'm at home so that I didn't have to come home too late. Actually, so Steve came to talk to me to ask me questions about the meteorology, and then I asked him questions about the forest. So we learned from each other, which was a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Actually, I have a question for Steve, if you don't mind.
That's what you're here for, Lord.
Related to the pines that float, right, on water. A couple of times when I've gone to give presentations around, people tell me that some of these pines are still in the ponds. And what they describe is that they surface once in a while. So my question to you is, do they eventually sink? Waterlogged?
Yeah.
What do you know about that?
Yeah. So it seems that there is some small percentage of the logs did in fact sink. Either there's so much weight, so the pile was so heavy in one place that they sort of got stuck in the muddy bottom of a pond. The Forest Service did a study, and they found that there was about 2% of the logs stayed in the water. And so they do turn up every once in a while, and people do in fact go after them. I did talk to a fellow who did a bunch of diving for them, and brought them up and brought them to a mill, sold them to a mill, and they were in perfect condition, perfect 1938 condition, because they're totally preserved underwater. If it was, a mixture of air and water, they would have rotted, but they were perfectly preserved. And so people do find them in ponds all over New England now, and you'll know that it's not just a tree that fell into the water, because it'll have cut ends. It'll be cut like a log, and on these there's a U.S. stamp on the end of it. They put a stamp on the end of every log that they bought, and so you can tell.
I told the lady that told me about them that she needed to take a picture the next time she saw one of those.
Yeah. I hear about it pretty regularly, and then I finally saw one that actually where they took a photo of the stamp. So that was pretty cool.
You might need to share that with me.
Yeah.
So I can see.
Okay.
it.
Yes, I will. Yeah.
And I have another follow-up question to this.
Yeah.
Is the quality of the wood exactly as a normal pine, or is it different? Can you tell this pine was underwater for a while?
From what I hear, no. I mean, if you bring it up and you saw it, I think it basically has the same characteristics of pine that you cut today. That's what I've been told. I've not seen it. The fact that it's waterlogged full of water, it'll take much more drying than a normal saw log would. But no, I think the characteristics are just the same. It's not it's not deteriorated at all.
So I found out, I'm sure you've seen these chairs made with pine, with wood from the hurricane.
Yeah.
So I found information about the company that makes them is a chair maker in Massachusetts that dates back to the colonial times. And all the stamps are exactly the same. Now I can recognize them. And a couple of Christmas ago, I found myself a little kitty rocking chair, so it's sitting in my office.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, so it has the right stamp and everything.
So the company was what? Was it
Nichols and Stone?
Nichols and Stone. Okay.
So you have an N and an S in the shape of a chair. You can imagine that.
Right. So that was in Gardner, Mass, and Gardner was really, really hard hit. And Gardner at the time really was the chair making capital of the United States. I mean, they had tons of chair manufacturers there. Yeah. Oh, that's cool.
Yeah,
good for you.
Those are cool stories.
For
sure.
Yeah.
So, you talked about the rarity of these hurricanes in New England. Talk about the three main storms. You talk about it for a second. Lourdes, you jump in wherever, that have hit New England, how they compared when they happened, and how long do you think it'll be? Obviously, we don't know till we have another one.
Yeah. So there's been three in recorded history. Three that were at least Category 2 when they made landfall. That was 1635, and that was more of a coastal. It went through Massachusetts, the corner of Massachusetts. Must have gone over Long Island as well. Then 1815 was farther inland, and it did quite a bit of damage, and there was a lot of people living here by then. 1635, the nation was barely settled. And then, so 1815 was a bigger one. It would have affected New Hampshire as well. So Massachusetts and all of southern New England and part of New Hampshire as well. Almost no effect in Vermont. And then 38, which came right through Vermont.
And
so it really is.
Oh, sorry. And I love the names of these storms. The 1635 was the Great Colonial Hurricane. 1815 was the Great Gale of 1815. So they earned names because they were so significant.
Yeah.
So Brian, did the hurricane history of New England influence your meteorology career at all?
Not directly that I know of, but I do remember my father talking pretty often about the hurricane of 38, because he was living in Bath, New Hampshire, just a few miles to the east of Wells River, and actually had about 600 acres that he was farming. And I know that part of what he had to do was to get the trees up. You've talked about how many were down. And I remember him talking about the large number of trees that were down, but I don't remember specifically. It was more Hurricane Donna in 1960 that got me into weather.
Yeah.
Yeah, and in 1938, I don't guess there were chainsaws, were there? So this was not everybody get out your chainsaws and go tack the trees. This was hard work.
Yeah, there's all sorts of great photos of guys out with their axes and their crosscut saws. It was incredible, the technology that they did this. Basically the largest logging job that's ever happened in New England was the result of this storm, and so this all happened with axes and crosscut saws.
And
a very short period of time.
I imagine the sawyers had to be careful too, because you might run into a tree that had the stents in it for the maple sap, huh?
Well, with the hardwoods, basically they would butt the log at 5 feet or so. I mean, they would not even try to cut into the wood in the first 5 feet, because that's where all the taps would be. So you go up to about a 5-foot height and just start cutting there.
So what does that term mean, Steve? I remember you saying that in the book, and I didn't know what it meant, to butt a tree.
To butt it, well, normally you'd cut a log right at the stump. The lowest log on a tree is the butt log, and so normally that would be an 8-foot or as much as a 16-foot log. It's the most valuable wood on a tree, and so unfortunately here you've got all these maple taps possibly left in there. You don't know until you saw into it, but so you just butt it. You make a butt log at 5 feet rather than, and so you're just throwing that wood away on, the prime wood in the log. But that's the way to keep your saw from exploding.
Yeah, Stephen, I was looking at your website and I was looking at some of the pictures you have on there, and I must admit I haven't seen or thought of a peavey in quite some time. But you have a picture of a man with standing by some trees with an axe, and a peavey standing there to roll the log or whatever he had to do to move it. So that was kind of neat. Because I haven't thought about one of those for years. Right.
That's a beautiful tool. I have one of those, and I use it when I'm doing my own firewood. It's a very cool old tool.
Yeah. Well, I was pretty young when we moved away. I was only about 11, so I used one, but I'm sure not well.
Yeah. So we're talking about the technology. I mean, so the highest technology for moving logs at that point was a crawler tractor. So basically a tractor with tracks, and it would pull a scoot, and the scoot would just be 2 parallel elm boards, beams basically, with tipped up fronts, and you would load those up. You could put maybe 1,000 board feet on it and drag that away. But no skidders, no forwarders, nothing like what we're using today.
Yeah.
So Lori,
I have a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question. Steve, one of the things that I find the most interesting is about the signs that you can find in the forest and the terrain and the trees that you describe beautifully in your book. I love that. So maybe you want to describe a little bit about those signs and also the differences between the pine trees and the hardwoods, how you can tell.
Okay, sure. Yeah, that's okay. So without any visual aids, this might be a little difficult, but basically, so if when a tree blows down in the woods, what happens is the root wad. So don't think of a root ball like this anymore. A root wad is basically a flat plate. It's like a dinner plate. So when a tree is down, this is the trunk, and here's the vertical is the root wad. And so basically the way that works is this is what's been wrenched out of the ground. So and now it's standing like that, and the trunk is parallel. So when it wrenches that out of the ground, it takes a lot of soil and rock and anything that's attached to those roots with it, and so it creates quite a hole in the ground there.
Yeah.
And then over time, that soil and rock will slough off as the trunk and the root, the wood rot, and so it leaves this. It leaves basically a little hillock of soil right there, and so you've got a hole and a hillock, and so it's called pit and mound topography. And so you'll see this anytime a tree falls. So it's not just by itself. It's not a sign of the hurricane damage, but you can also tell what direction the tree fell by looking at this pit and mound. And if you see that they all fell to the north or the northwest as a result of the south or the southeast wind, then you know that these were blown down in the 38 hurricane. And so basically the way you know is you stand in the hole and you look out over the mound, And so so you're looking at the direction that the tree fell. And so if the wind was at your back, it blew it in that direction. And so if that wind was from the southeast blowing to the northwest, then that's hurricane damage. No other wind around here will be enough to blow trees down.
And how deep are these pits? How deep?
What's that?
How deep are these pits?
It depends on how big the tree was, but my land here in Corinth blew down. That's why I've gotten so interested in all of this. And I've got pits in my woods that you could put a Volkswagen in. I mean, they're can be really huge. Yeah. And then, you know, a correspondingly large mound. So it's really kind of crazy terrain, really just rolling these tiny, you know, these hills filled with these hillocks, kind of like moguls if you're a skier. So there's another sign that you can see as well, and it's trees that right themselves after having been tipped. So a lot of trees didn't blow down, that they were tipped, and so if they were tipped in that direction, they then will, with photosynthesis or phototropism, they'll want to get upright. And so you'll see a lot of trees with a shape kind of like a boomerang. And if you see a lot of those that are shaped like that are pointed in this proper direction to the north or the northwest, then you know that those trees were tipped by the 38 hurricane.
So Steve, we have a lot of fall foliage fans on here. So talk just a minute about any myths that need to be dispelled or whatever when we're trying to explain why the leaves change colors and et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, gee. Well, myths to be dispelled. One of the things that we talk about around here is the difference between red maple and sugar maple. I mean, sugar maple is the prominent tree in Vermont, and we just, you know, we it's the state tree, and we just look at it, and it's golds and you know, all sorts of different gold, yellow, orangey colors. But and red maple is much less prized. It's much less prized as a timber tree, but people sort of don't think about it contributing that much to the foliage. But in fact, red maple is the foliage is gorgeous. It can be, you know, it can be pink, it can be deep crimson, anywhere in that spectrum, and it adds a tremendous amount. And it comes at a different time, lots of times, because it kind of precedes the rest of the stuff. So you get the swamps. You'll see these swamps that are just bathed in red in early September, before the hillsides start to turn. And so we get some really, really beautiful swamp maples, what we call them. So that's one that I can think of. That
if
Bill, you have a
and Bill and Steve, how about what people say that the first frost brings the colors? Have you heard that one?
Yeah, talk about that. That is interesting, Steve.
I don't think that's true, right, Steve?
Well, I don't know. It seems like it needs, whether it's the first frost or not, it does seem to need an event like that to really start popping.
So, like so what happens? Oh, go ahead.
It's just chemically, I think so I'm getting a little out of my league here, but I can make it up as good as anybody.
I've looked into it because I had a friend that was a professor of plant biology, and she was an expert on trees before she died. I mean, and I pestered her constantly to ask her about these, and so it's a combination of the loss of sunlight as the days get shorter and the colder temperatures, but you can't really go below freezing. So it's not the frost. In fact, if you spend too much time below freezing, the leaves could just fall off. So you need the temperatures to stay cold, say I don't know, high 30s, low 40s,
Hmm.
in order to signal the chemical signal that the season is ending together with the sunlight. And I think different species need different, pay more attention to
Yeah.
one or the
Yeah.
other.
Yeah. I think that's true. But this year, for instance, this year was really kind of drab for a while, and then we did get a bit of a cold snap, and it really started to pop.
Yeah,
And
we
so-
had a big heat wave, right, when the colors
Yeah.
were supposed to come out. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was.
Brian,
it was
I
a
think our
peculiar-
colors have been pretty good this year. It just seems like
Yeah.
our trees here in Alabama have been more vibrant and more colorful than in past years. I don't know if that's just anecdotal, but it seems like.
Do you
it's
still have leaves on the trees?
I was going to
Yeah,
ask the same
guess-
thing.
I took a picture of a ginkgo tree at our botanical gardens on Wednesday morning that was just splendid, and it's full regalia, bright yellow leaves, and just spectacular. About 30-foot tree that just was just stunning.
Our
Nice.
trees our leaves have been gone for more than a month now.
Yeah, as a matter of
Yeah,
fact, this morning at the kitchen table, I commented to my wife that we still got a lot of leaves to go yet.
Wow.
Yeah, kind of spreading it out for us, Brian. So
Yeah.
one of my other favorite podcasts is Night Sky. So I know you've got some contacts with Mark Breen and the crew over there at the Fairbanks Museum.
Yes, indeed.
Steve, maybe you could put a good word in for us to have him on the show sometime. He would be fun. So he does weather forecasting, or they do weather forecasting as well, huh?
Yes, they do. Yeah. In fact, Mark and Lourdes were my meteorological team to help me understand how this all worked. So I relied on Mark quite a bit. They have a great museum up there, and he's been there forever. His voice is one of the most recognizable voices in New England because we've all been listening to him do the weather for so many years. So I'll definitely I'll call him up and let him know that.
But don't tell him what a bad experience it was. Just tell him the good part, and maybe he'll still come on the show. So. Lourdes, I'll ask you one more question, then I'm sure the other panelists may have something to add. But what are you going to bring out in the addition to the book? Anything you can share with us?
Let's see. It's been a couple of months since I last saw it, but a lot of it were pieces of information that came my way because of the publication of the book in the first place, or also because people that attended my talks made me aware of a resource or a picture or gave me a lead of some piece of information that they thought I might find interesting. So I have ended up learning a lot. So I added, I don't know, 5, 6, 7, I can't remember right now, different stories. Talked about the chairs that I mentioned earlier. I talked about the discs with the stamp from the Hartford. I've tried to track a little more information. I found some very interesting details about the seal that's on the discs. I spent a lot of time talking. I used some of what I learned from Steve. Of course, I mentioned his book and himself about the effects on the forest. I added a little more detail than before, a couple of paragraphs. Talked more about what we know about the extratropical transition of hurricanes and how that can be quantified and how we still don't do it, but different options of how you could do that. What else? Oh, some very interesting piece of information about how the ownership of the Mount Washington, the land where the Mount Washington Observatory is, has a connection to the 38 hurricane. And a few other things, enough to fill a 15-page chapter.
Oh, wow. So when will that version of the book be out?
I don't have the exact date, but I believe the American Meteorological Society would like to to have it out early in the year, if possible, by the annual meeting, but I'm not sure that's going to be the case. But definitely for the 80th anniversary of the storm.
Wow.
So.
Well, James Spann, I'm sure the other panelists have something to add, and you may have some questions.
I wanted to ask Brian Peters. Brian, what was it like forecasting that hurricane of 1938, working for the National Weather Service back then?
Shoot, I wasn't even a what do you call it?
Toddler?
My parents hadn't even got married yet.
All right, so we're at the bottom of the hour. We got to stop for a minute and roll Professor Peters and Tony Rice in the astronomy report. We'll come back with email, picks of the week, and much more as WeatherBrains rolls along.
WeatherBrains 101 with Professor Peters.
As most weather enthusiasts know, Hurricane Maria devastated Puerto Rico when it made a direct hit on the island on August 20th. The storm did not spare weather equipment, damaging the FAA's WSR-88D radar that covers Puerto Rico and the U.S. Virgin Islands. Technicians determined it would take months to repair that damage. Working with FEMA, the NWS asked the Department of Defense to deploy military tactical X-band radars to provide coverage, specifically Marine Corps radars capable of exporting next-gen Level 3 data. This venture marked the first time NWS requested use of military assets. The radar equipment was housed at the Space and Naval Warfare Systems Command in San Diego. The NWS staff first visited the San Diego facility to determine if the Navy's portable radars were compatible with the NWS systems or if they would require testing and modifications to the data to display the radar data in AWIPS at NWS San Juan. Next, NWS called in its Radar Operations Center specialists to work with the Navy staff on the complex deployment. The radar and AWIPS team worked diligently to get the radars configured correctly and the data massaged to format into AWIPS. DoD agreed to deploy and deliver 2 mobile radars, one on each side of Puerto Rico. This joint Navy and NWS endeavor came to fruition on October the 21st. Radar products for the area started displaying in AWIPS on October the 30th. With the hard work done, the door is now open for future collaborations should another extreme weather event disastrously impact the ability of the NWS to monitor weather events such as Hurricane Maria. If you have a question about the weather, drop an email to question@weatherbrains.com.
Looking beyond the atmosphere, here's Tony Rice with your Astronomy Outlook.
Watching the International Space Station fly overhead never gets old. There's 6 astronauts up there in a spacecraft that spans the size of a football field and has as much interior space as a 2-story suburban home. And all this is flying at 17,400 miles an hour as it circles the planet. This week's a particularly good one for spotting the station. Each night, there are opportunities across the continental United States to see the station. Tuesday, the station will rise from the southwest, starting about 5:45 Pacific time. It'll be visible throughout the southwestern states, all the way up the California coast into Oregon. That same pass continues nearly directly over Salt Lake City, where you will see it dim out of view as it enters Earth's shadow. From the deep south to Chicago and northward, your best pass on Tuesday evening begins at 5:24 p.m. as station passes over Houston, through Louisiana, Mississippi, and follows just west of the Appalachians before disappearing over the New York-Pennsylvania state line 4 minutes later. On Wednesday, Northern California up to Vancouver will see the station top the southwestern horizon at about 5:46 p.m. It'll again enter Earth's shadow, again over the Great Salt Lake. Again from the southwest, the station will rise at 5:33 p.m. Eastern, following a line from the Florida Panhandle through Atlanta, Charlotte, Philly, and finally New York City, before exiting out over the Sunnyvale Trailer Park in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia. Now, these are just a sampling of the opportunities this week. Visit heavens-above.com and enter your city for exact times and directions to look. There's also a number of free smartphone applications that will even raise alarms just before the station appears. And do yourself a favor, Invite someone who's not seen it before to join you outside. That's your Astronomy Outlook. Follow me at RTP Hokie for more spacey stuff like this.
When the weather ball is red, warmer weather is ahead. When the weather ball is white, colder weather is in sight. When the weather ball is green, no change in the weather is foreseen. When colors blink by night or day, precipitation's on the way.
Let's do a weather roundup. This is for November 27th, 2017. Our Texas-Oklahoma crew, they're AWOL tonight. Where are these guys? Where's Kevin? Where's Rick? Do we know?
The one with the silky smooth voice.
But we do have Kim here, who is in Guthrie, Oklahoma. Or are you in Oklahoma City, Kim?
I'm in Norman, just south.
Norman.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So what's happening out there? How warm is it?
It was actually really warm. I haven't seen where this falls in the range of normal, but it was a pretty warm day here. I enjoyed it. I know a lot of my friends who are enthusiasts are getting tired of these repeated dips in toward fall, and then we get thrust back into late summery kind of weather, and today was one of those days. So yeah, definitely a slow crawl toward fall here.
But it looks like a pattern change might kind of develop next week that might bring your cold weather friends some good news there. Down here in the deep south, it's just delightful. We're starting off these days around freezing, and we get up in the 60s. It's just beautiful. Aubrey, what's happening in Harrisonburg?
I think it's feeling like it's all Alabama here. We've got lows in the 30s, highs around 60, and every day in my forecast this next week is above average. So pretty nice, nothing to complain about. Still dry.
Is your sky very blue?
It is very blue.
Yeah, I love fall blue.
Deep
Cobalt
blue. It's not like
blue.
that light. Yeah, it's nice and dark blue.
All right, so Lourdes, what you got up there in the northeast United States?
I'm
Stephen,
looking at it right now. Our current temperature in Plymouth, New Hampshire is 17.8 degrees Fahrenheit.
Ouch.
Whoa.
Our high, I know, our high was 34 degrees. So it's a chilly day, and the temperature is going down. I believe we are expected to be in the low teens by the end of the night.
Yes, and Mount Washington set the low for the nation at 2.
Yeah. Yes, it's a little colder up there.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Great spot, but a little cold up there. Yes.
Yes.
Brian, you've been up there before, haven't you? You've been to the
I
summit?
have. Yes, just a few years ago, as a matter of fact. It was one of the only good 7 days in the entire summer, and I happened to pick one of them to go up there. Great forecast.
This was a summer trip, I think, not a winter trip.
Yeah, yes, definitely.
You should all come, and we'll go up there if you dare to drive up the auto road.
Stephen, have you been to Mount Washington?
It's a little scary.
I'll go in the summer.
Don't they close that thing in the winter?
Oh yeah, they do.
Yeah.
It's closed now. Yes, but
my birthday's at the end of September, and my wife and I went up there last year for the first time, and it is spectacular. And it was just a crisp blue day. It was really gorgeous, and you can see forever up there.
Absolutely.
And the wind does blow.
Yes. Did you take the Cog Railroad, or did you take the road?
We drove.
I took the railroad, yeah.
Oh, you did, yeah.
There's a special treat that if you're lucky, you can see. It's called an undercast, where you go through the clouds and it's clear and all the clouds are under you.
Yeah.
So if you go during a day that's happening, is a rare treat.
Nice.
The day we were up there, it was high cirrus.
What do you think is best, the railroad or driving?
Yeah, they each have their good points.
It's very expensive to go on the railroad.
Well, yes, but you probably need a brake job after you drive up there or get down.
Even trade.
I think
driving is a totally white knuckle experience.
Oh yeah.
It is, oh God, the switchbacks and oh yeah. And
but the cliffs are beautiful.
Yes.
So if you can get over the fact that there's a giant drop off right next to you, it's beautiful.
I will debate it.
Actually, some of the
we got to roll this email here before we run too long. Let's see if anything's in the old inbox this week.
Letters. We get letters. We get stacks and stacks of letters.
Brian got cut off.
Well, I've got a 10 o'clock news here, so I'm trying
like
to
champing at the bit to get that in.
expedite things here.
All right. So we have an email.
When I'm done, you guys can talk all night.
All right. We have an email from James Deese who says, what I love about the WeatherBrains is the most is that the people on the show really put the brains in WeatherBrains. By the way, I'm the same dude. He's the same dude that complimented the backgrounds last week. So this one might be a juicy email. Also, Brian, he mentioned that your room looks very brewery looking. I love how James
brewery. I think it was the smell is what he meant.
I love how James is always trying to find something funny no matter what the situation is. Brian is always stealing Wi-Fi and can always determine the science behind anything. I bet he can predict when aliens will arrive on Earth.
Oh.
Bill Murray is typically eating something, then he complains about being out of breath after interviewing.
I don't remember complaining about being out of breath. I do resemble the remark about eating.
Rick Smith has a smooth, silky voice. Kevin is always cranky, and Aubrey is just Aubrey. What does that mean?
What does that mean? Is that a compliment or is he bashing you?
I don't know. Nate Johnson is the one who always is absent to the show. Have we even heard? Is he still alive? Have we heard from him? Is he still around?
Allegedly, he runs the NBC O&O weather operation, but I don't believe it because until he comes on this show, I won't believe it.
So he's a big deal. He's
kind of a big deal now.
All right. So thank you, James. We appreciate that email. Chris White sent us an interesting article about lightning-induced radioactivity. Is a very interesting article, very difficult to read, but an interesting article. So thank you, Chris. And then also Tarmo, our friend Tarmo sent in another recording and also a link to the NASA page that he mentions in the recording where NASA views severe rainstorms over Western Saudi Arabia. Do you want to play that?
Yeah, let's roll it. Here we go.
Hello, WeatherBrains. This is Tarmo Nilsov from Lagu, Estonia, this time in a better mood and with an update. Currently, a thing that has caught my attention is a polar low near Svalbard, also known as Spitsbergen in German, and also Teramäed in Estonian. It is expected to cause snowfall and winds in northern Troms and western Finnmark regions of Norway on Tuesday evening. A polar low is a small warm core cyclone that takes place in that general region in the winter period. Last week, Saudi Arabia received some really nasty thunderstorms. On Tuesday morning local time, the city of Jeddah was flooded by heavy rain. Even the raw satellite feeds from the country showed some pretty impressive clouds in the sky as it happened. And impressive it was. Thunderstorm tops were that high that cloud top temperatures on infrared imagery hit minus 80 degrees Celsius, at least according to the maps on Kachelmann-Wetter. And NASA has an article out about the GPM satellite measurements of this event. I've sent the link to powers that be. And finally, as you can see, there can be quite a bit of drama over weather apps and not just in the United States. Now, I'm not going to get into weather wars today. I'm instead going to talk about tech. You see, since one could expect that the task of these apps would be to pull and visualize data from the internet, maybe a discussion should be had. Maybe we should be moving more towards web-based apps. And okay, I get it. You people are used to having native apps and so on and so on. But listen, first, of course, it would help if people did have the habit of using the add to home screen functionality in the web browsers, in their phones, etc. But at least in the Android world, there is some additional development. There's a thing called progressive web apps. Basically, they are web pages designed to look like a mobile app. You could use them in the browser, you could use them in the computer, you could use them on a phone, on tablet. Basically, just use Chrome, Firefox, etc. to view them. However, they have some extra things. On Chrome browser, if certain criteria are met, then the users will be prompted with an install dialog. Basically, you could it will say, hey, would you like to install this to your home screen? And once you install it, it will install like a native app. So basically, it will be in your app drawer. It will be on the home screen. And in fact, if you open it up, if it's configured to do so, you will not even see that there is a browser running. You will see the app content itself. No address bars, anything. You could still refresh though. At least on my phone, I've observed the pull to refresh works. So what are the criteria? Number 1, web app manifest, with a short name for the home screen, a name for the banner, install banner, that is a 192 by 192 pixels PNG icon, and then an start URL for the start page. Then it has to have a service worker. It is a piece of JavaScript code that will work in the background. At minimum, it will provide some core offline functionality, some caching. So if you try to access it offline, you would not get a could not connect error. It could also be used for other things, such as push notifications, something like you would do on native apps right now. HTML5 is pretty rich with all sorts of bells and whistles. You could even do graphics. You could even do some 3D. So think about it. And also, there are some additional criteria. For example, it needs to be served over HTTPS. That is encrypted HTTP. So the old unencrypted system will not work. It will have to be over a secure channel. And it also meets a site engagement heuristic defined by Chrome. This is not, by the way, just a Chrome topic. It's also coming to Firefox for Android. Last time I checked, it was out in the nightlies. Since I don't daily use Firefox on Android, I don't know the exact status from my own experience, but there is something moving there as well. And for those who are still on systems and browsers not yet supporting PWAs, if you could still use a browser of your choice and just manually add it to your bookmarks, home screen, etc. It will still work. You perhaps might not have all the functionalities, etc. Although you could still do quite a few of things, and it will still open up. You could still browse it. So perhaps it's time to, instead of doing native apps for things that can be done on a web page, even if you do offload it to client side, maybe it's time to discuss, do we really need to make a native app for every different platform and really write an extra set of code for every platform? Maybe that productivity can be done to instead making use of newer web technologies. However, there would probably need to be some consumer outreach on that. And that's another long rant from me, and now it's over. So have a nice evening from Lago, Estonia. This was Tarmo Daniel, so you can follow me on Twitter at ES5NHC.
Does anybody know what Tarmo was talking about here? I just like to hear the guy talk. You know?
Exactly. Do away with all apps and just.
It was a way. It was way. He was very technical for me. Very smart. He's very smart.
Did I just listen to it natively?
Super smart.
The other day.
This was another one that we did. This was the second one he's done.
I have a question for you, James.
Go.
Do you know where the weather ball was located? The one that you
Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota.
Very good. That's good.
They gave, when I was up there, I was in Minneapolis doing a talk at an IWT session, and they gave me a little miniature version of the weather ball. So, does anybody notice I changed? The one thing I like Tarmo, I had enough time to change into TV clothes.
You got a phone booth back there or something?
Yeah, I am in a phone booth. That's where I do this show. Are we done with email, Aubrey? Is that it?
Yes, that is the email. Email at weatherbrains.com. My tag
Okay,
out.
so what we're going to do here is do picks of the week, and I hate to go, but I've got to go because I've got to go do some television. So, Bill Murray, what's your pick of the week? And I'll let you pick it up from here.
Yeah, my pick is going to be the foghorn, James. If you can hit it right before you go out the door there.
Well, that's the last chore I've got.
Thank you. But I will use my pick of the week to talk about our future guest. Next week, Monday night, December 4th, Eli Jacks will be talking about his simplification projects at the National Weather Service. We're going to have the famous Steve Weiss retiring from the Storm Prediction Center. He'll be on December 11th. AMS Commissioner for Public Affairs, Maureen McCann, will join us on the 18th. Dr. Pam Heintzelman will join us on the 20th. That'll be a fun show. Of course, Greg Carbon will be along for his year-end show on the 21st. And then we will flip the page into January. And Brian Peters?
Yes.
I don't think either you or I will have a dog in the hunt now on that January the 8th. So I guess you and I may be the show that night because neither one of us will have a football team in the college football playoff for sure.
Also, Bill, you better check some facts there.
Which fact?
You're advertising Steve Weiss's retirement.
Is that not true?
I spoke with him just a week ago, and he told me it's not true.
Oh, good. Well, I will stop saying that. I don't know why I think that. Someone said something that made me think that. But
yeah, I ran into him at the Vortex Southeast meeting in Huntsville, the day I was James Spann's chauffeur, and and Steve said no, he hasn't definitely decided.
Okay, well, good. Well, then we will just have the great Steve Weiss on the show.
Absolutely. I enjoyed talking with him. He's a nice person.
He is, and I'm looking forward to it. And then I just heard from Greg Mant today. I've been after him for about a month, but he's been a little busy launching a satellite.
Yes.
And now that we've got JPSS up in the sky, he wrote back this morning and said that he could join us sometime in late February, early March. So I'm excited about having him on the show. So those are all my picks of the week, all my future guests that are coming up on WeatherBrains. So, Steve, I know you didn't get warned about this pick of the week thing, I don't think, but you did a fabulous job tonight. Thank you for being on the show. And do you have anything you want to tout or use as your pick?
Well, we talked about Mark Breen earlier in the Fairbanks Museum, fairbanksmuseum.org. It's a go-to place around here for all things weather related, and also the night sky. Eye on the night sky is a wonderful thing, and so I'd go to fairbanksmuseum.org. Definitely worth checking out.
Yeah, there's 50 adventure points in it for you if you get him to come on the show. So
okay, very good, very good,
eternal
very
glory. Good. Dr. Lourdes, we've missed you. How you been?
I'm good. So I was not prepared because I only learned.
How could you not be prepared? Did you forget?
I know, no, but now I am prepared. Okay. Since we mentioned it several times, I got inspired to make my pick of the week, the Mount Washington Observatory website. I'm sure you featured it in the past, but it's mountwashington.org. And you can see webcams, all sorts of weather information, posts from the weather observers. It can be quite entertaining, and the home of the world's worst weather, as they like to call it.
Brian is at the peaks of the week, and he says the statute of limitations has run out, so you can use that one again.
Perfect.
Always a good one. That one I like.
It's always a good go-to. I need to keep that one in my back pocket. Kim, your new last name, what is it?
So I'm going to be, for professional purposes, just hyphenating. So you still get to say my absurdly hard to pronounce for such a short name, Cloco, but now you get to add McLean to it. So it'll be Cloco McLean.
How am I going to remember
because we
that,
needed
Brian
more
Peters?
consonants.
Right.
Huh?
Give me some mnemonics to help me remember, so I won't forget.
We need to have a poll. Which one is worse, that one or Urbanowitz?
Oh my gosh. There was a guy who was actually, he messaged me on Facebook jokingly, and he said, oh gosh, now you can not deal with these misspellings with McLean. And when he wrote McLean, he misspelled it. He didn't even C. And he was like, oh gosh. And I was like, yeah, guess what? Not over.
You just have that moment, Thanksgiving Day, I was texting, with a friend, and, you come to that moment, do you say, hope you and Tiffany and your children have a great Thanksgiving, or you dare and go for it and say Riley and Rooney? And, you do it on text, you got to spell it right. So, I took my best shot, and, you immediately get the text back. Says, yeah, Riley's having really good fun, helping with the sides, and of course spelled it correctly. So I would see that I'd spelled it wrong. And then we got an invitation to their birthday party today, and they misspelled my last name. So there was poetic justice.
Revenge, yes.
Sorry. So Kim, I can't remember. Did we do a pick of the week?
Not yet, not yet. Sorry. Yep. Derailed with the name conversation. So on the theme of the wedding, though, I did a pick that relates to the honeymoon. And I thought this was so fascinating. If you've ever gone to the Hawaiian Islands, they actually have a system of directions giving that relates to the direction the wind is blowing, or really their relationship to the mountains. But they call that relationship to the mountains their various wind names. So if you're going toward the mountain, then that's the Mauka, and out from the mountain toward the sea is the Makai. And they know, the people are very, very aware of the direction the wind is blowing because it portends rain, especially on the north side of the islands. The north side of all of the Hawaiian Islands is very lush and sort of a rainforest jungle. And the south side of the islands is very dry, sort of desert climate. So I thought this was just a really neat thing to share. It's a very different way of seeing the world, but to them, east and west weren't what was important to their daily life. What was more important was the direction that the mountain was from them, and relatedly, the direction the wind was blowing, whether it was going to rain soon or not.
That's outstanding. So maybe on Monday, January 8th, we can have your honeymoon slides. How about that, Kim?
Great.
So, but you may have a dog. You may have a dog in the hunt that night.
I'm looking, yeah. So I'm trying to get some folks from the office where I worked at headquarters, trying to pull their arms to get them on the show to talk about the Academy study. And I might plant a bug in Eli's ear next week to get him to do some magic over there at headquarters to get them on.
Yeah, I'm sure you can get it done. That's great. So thank you, Kim. Brian Peters, what's your pick of the week?
Well, at this time of the year, we're all thinking about places where we can donate some money. And I'd like to offer up the National Weather Association's Foundation. So I'll have the link to that. So
some adventure points for you, Brian Peters. Good job.
Yeah. And James Spann had a link, and he didn't say what it was, but there's a report out now about the U.S. Weather Alert System requiring some modernization.
And we'll be talking about that to some degree next week. I'm sure,
yes.
Kim, you'll be loaded for bear, so you gotta be here, Kim. All right. So Aubrey, what's your pick of the week? Are you muted? Yeah, you're muted, Aubrey. Who muted you?
No, I'm sorry. I think it was me because I accidentally called out my anchor's wrinkles on camera when
I was wondering what was going on.
I thought I was muted. I was not. Just kidding, Kyle. Mine is the ISS Spot the Station, which I did not know Tony was actually talking about tonight. So that's a nice coincidence, where you can also sign up for alerts to be alerted with the International Space Station flyovers.
That's outstanding. Yeah, that's always fun. I always look forward to that. So, all right. Is there any other further business that we need to bring before this august group here tonight? Well, hearing no other protestations from our panel, I will announce that WeatherBrains is the weekly netcast. It's all about weather. We do this fun show all the time on Monday nights. It'll be a little off kilter as we get toward the end of December because we'll have to do some shows on Wednesday and Thursday to account for Span's vacation. But Brian Peters, 619 shows in the books.
Holy mackerel.
Somewhere in there's going to be an anniversary coming up around the end of January. We'll have to kind of remember that. So
I didn't know I could count that high.
I know. I didn't either, but we're learning how to. But you can pick us up on any of your favorite places to catch podcasts, and of course, you can see the show live every week at live.bigbrainsmedia.com. You can, of course, check out the website, go back and look at the old shows, look at this week's show, pick us up on iTunes or anywhere else that you consume podcasts. So it is a labor of love, something we enjoy doing very, very much. And until next week, when our guest will be Eli Jacks from the National Weather Service, I hope you have a great week and see you then.
Thanks, Stephen. Lourdes, enjoyed it.
Thank you, Steve. Great
Thank you.
Great book and great time tonight. It's fun hearing your expertise.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, Lourdes, how Dan and the kids?
They're doing good, running around. The children are huge now.
I was going to say they're almost grown.
I had to look up to say, behave.
Yeah.
And they looked down and said, oh, yes, Mom, Yeah.
Well, good. Well, have a happy holidays, Lourdes, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too.
All right, Steve. See you later.
Yeah. Bye-bye. Thanks.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye.
And yes, it is that time of the program where we say hello. We're actually not doing Song of the Night yet. I've not done the weather segment. We're in a break here. So thank you guys for watching. Interesting show tonight. And we'll see you guys next Monday night. Have a great week. God bless. See you later. Bye-bye. Thanks for watching.